Welcome to CWS Christian Writing and Speaking. I'm your host, Jackie Wilson. And today's guest received 3 miracles within 72 hours during Easter weekend in 2012. She used this major turning point to trade off her multiple award-winning sales career at Pfizer Pharmaceuticals to become the author, multilingual speaker, and turning points coach she is today. She lives her passion by helping men and women who find themselves at a crossroads, navigating change with confidence, faith, and joy. Her mission is to help professional parents become the best versions of themselves, trust and act on their inner wisdom, and integrate their personal and professional lives with joy. She does this through her Joy in the Journey masterminds, keynote addresses, one-on-one coaching, and conditioning programs. Let's welcome to the CWS stage, Miss Sylvia Worsham. Welcome, Sylvia.
Hi, Jackie. It's so awesome to meet you in person.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we hear these type of stories and people wonder, how did she do it? Like, where did the courage come from to walk away from that? And so we want to hear your story, Sylvia. What made you walk away from that job?
It took a life-altering moment, a near-death experience in 2012 to kind of wake me up to the reality that I wasn't living out my divine soul's purpose. I was simply acting on old belief systems of not enoughness. And I landed in the prime breeding ground of sales. When you don't feel enough and you are a high achiever and a perfectionist and you've been raised by one, sales is really the place to go because you're endlessly striving. There's no end to that. Striving, you're striving for happiness, you're striving for fulfillment, you're striving. I never strove for money, Jackie, which is, it's not heard of in sales. Typically, people get into sales because they like the money that they make. It wasn't money for me at all. It was significance from others because I, at my core, did not feel enough or worthy. And I tied my worth to the size of my paycheck. So that's what kept me there for a long time. And then God used a lovely choice of me taking birth control pills after the age of 35 as an opportunity to kind of get my attention a little bit, because that created a side effect in me. And interestingly enough, coming from pharmaceuticals, I became the side effect I often talked about. I thought the irony of that was interesting to me. And I landed in the hospital in Houston, Texas for 12 days almost 2 weeks with a life-threatening situation. And that's where I received my 3 miracles. And it just kind of shifted my life around dramatically. But it wasn't immediate because we're human and we overthink and we obsess. And I'm one of those. And I'm a very stubborn child of God that insists on doing things the hard way instead of the way that he envisioned for me. And so I kind of took a couple of detours along the way. And but I'm now in a very different space than I once was. And it's kind of awesome to see that journey.
Yeah, I love it. People want to know, what were the 3 miracles that happened?
I know everybody always wants to know, like, hey, share that story. Well, to give some context, I was a single mom at the time. I had a young son, 6-year-old boy, and I'd been divorced for about 3 years. And I'd been doing the therapy to get back on track to really get healthier emotionally and be ready to date. And so I started dating, who would soon become my second husband. And he invited my son and I to Louisiana for Easter weekend for a crawfish boil on Good Friday. And being a single mom, I knew that was a sure sign that he intended to marry me, that it was serious, because he wanted my boy to meet his family, So I was like, okay, well, he means well. But a couple of days before I took a flight, I had a pain that developed right below my breastbone. And it was weird. It was a really weird pain. But at the time, I was in really good physical health. I'd been exercising 7 days a week. So my family are an entire family of doctors. And so I had my pick of who I could call to say, hey, something's up. In all fairness to my brother, he didn't see me personally. He heard me over the phone. And so he kind of took into view like, hey, she's young, she's 37, she's in great health. It's probably something else. So he gave me like over-the-counter medication. And he did kind of say, hey, it's going to be painful. This is really common in young people. And so I was like, okay. So I get on a flight. My mother, being my mother, was like, mother's intuition is like, don't get on the flight. You look horrible. Like, you look pale and you don't sound right. But love was guiding me. I was so in love with my boyfriend that I took the flight. And as soon as I landed, I knew something was terribly wrong because I couldn't even get my luggage from underneath my seat without the pain being like so excruciating. And luckily, we spent the night at a hotel. So I'm in a hotel room with my little boy, and Donnie is in a room like adjacent to ours. And as I've already said, my brother said it was going to be painful. So at 3 a.m., this pain just jolted me out of bed. It was horrific, Jackie. It was like 50 knives were piercing my chest. And I was afraid to take a breath. I knew that if I took a breath, like a deeper breath, the pain would come back. And it was just horrible. And the first miracle that occurred was this prompting, this persistent prompting of lean forward, Sylvia, and you'll be able to breathe. And so I lean forward and I do this for 4 hours and I don't call a soul, nothing. And the next morning I wake up and I'm sitting up, which by the grace of God, that's already a miracle in itself. I didn't die that night. And I call my brother. And when he hears I took a flight, he's like, get to the emergency room like now. Don't even start driving to Louisiana until you get a picture of your lungs. Like, we got to look at your lungs. And I'm already like, intuitively, I knew something was up, right? But you kind of, your mind starts playing tricks on you, like, oh, it's probably stress, it's probably this. So you downplay the threat to your physical body. But we drive to the hospital. I walk in unassisted. They take a scan of my lungs, and in walks this really rough, very like boisterous doctor, and he's a specialist of the lungs. And he looks at me and he goes, a woman in your condition should not be sitting up talking to me right now. He said, you know that pain you felt last night? Those were 2 blood clots that traveled in the veins of your heart, did not stop it, and they're huge, and they're on your left lung. But that's not the only problem. We've got other problems. You have multiple pulmonary embolisms like everywhere. And I'm just amazed you didn't die last night. So they admit me. The next day, I get 6 doctors in my room, and I call them the firing squad because that's what they looked like. They came at me like with all these terms that were just so terrifying. Let's just put it that way. And they explained that I had this massive blood clot that was putting pressure on all the main organs in my body, especially my liver. And the 3 doctors on my right were part of the transplant team. So here come the words of liver transplant. And we don't know what to do, but we're going to try this. And trying this medication means that the potential of death is very high. So I have liver transplant, pulmonary embolisms, death, and possibly stroke, which runs in my family. And so I'm sitting there. At this point, my mom has flown up. My son is already in South Texas because we have family that flew up immediately when all this went down. The first thing that happens, Jackie, is I visualize falling into God's arms because medical community is not confident I'm going to survive. In fact, they had told my father, brother, and sister who are doctors that I had a 20% chance of surviving the night. I don't know this because I'm in this numbing state trying to grasp what's happening. And I've now surrendered and accepted my fate and truly like trusted God to take the reins at this point because science was only going to go so far. And I knew that coming from the medical background I came from. And the very next day, they started infusing me. And, the next day, this woman with the Catholic diocese walks into the room and she looks at her papers and she's like, are you Sylvia? Would you mind very much if I prayed with you? And we don't know if the therapy did work or didn't work. We were about to find out. And that was part of the stressful part of her coming in and wanting to pray with us and needing a miracle, really. Because if it hadn't worked, then they were going to go the interventional route. And that more than likely I was going to die on the table. And they had already explained that part. And so we form a circle. It's Donnie, the lady, and I, and we start reciting the Our Father. And in the part where it says, thy will be done, there's this enormous love that enveloped the whole room. I mean, it felt like he cradled me in his loving arms. It was so powerful. And as I think about it, I'm feeling his presence because that's how I felt that moment. I was so broken the night before, and him coming into the room is the second miracle because he basically tells me, "You're okay. I've got you. I've heard your prayers and you have been saved. I have saved you." And it's that knowing and that peace that washes over me. That's that miracle. And she leaves the room, and Donnie turns to me and he says, "You felt him too, didn't you?" And I couldn't even form the words to say yes. I just kind of mumbled yes. The moment was so powerful. I wish people on earth could feel that love that you feel from our Heavenly Father, and knowing that He does hear our prayers and that He is there when we ask for His help. And the third and final miracle was the fact that God had heard my prayers and He knew the role I was to play, His master plan. I didn't know it, right? I'm in the moment, but He knows it, and He knows that I need to be at my best. I cannot be weighed down by long-term effects of this thing, because what happens with these complications in your lungs is that they can leave holes, and so you can have scarring in the lungs, and so it does not make your life easier. It makes it harder, physically harder. So the third and final miracle is, which is what shocked the doctors, they deemed it impossible, was that I had zero long-term effects. When they went in there to look, I already knew I was cured. They didn't. And they were totally shocked. They had never seen a case like mine, as young as I was, as bad as it was, to come out of it like I had never been sick at all. It was utterly like wow. The doctor's face was like radiant, and I already knew, so my face was already radiant because God had already told me before I was even wheeled into the radiology department to kind of see what was going on. So that's the third and final miracle, and that is the three miracles, and it did happen within 72 hours, which is pretty powerful.
Yeah, I love it. And then you walked away from your job
I wish to
and
say I did it like right away, but that's not true. I
yeah.
did, it did take, let's see, that happened in 12. Donnie asked me to marry him, like, let's see, that happened in April. And in August, he asked me to marry him. And so I started to, that's when I traded off my big salary. I still stayed in sales when I moved to Austin, Texas from South Texas, which is like a good 6-hour drive in Texas. I did start all over again, all for love. Right. I traded off like multiple awards, multiple careers, which from a woman's perspective, when you've done the work and you've gotten to a certain height and level of respect in your company, it's really hard to let that go.
Yeah.
But when you're in love, and when you have felt God's love, and you have seen, and He has planted the seed of like, this is not who you're meant to be, Sylvia. This is your first act, but this isn't who I created you to be. And that's what that was the seed He kind of planted in my heart as I underwent these transformations. It wasn't the same after that near-death experience. But this is where I think most humans struggle, is that our mind, our ego identity comes into play. And our past experiences and our modeling and our belief systems, primarily our belief systems, are truly the drivers in control of why we act a certain way, and it kind of steers our choices. And that was a struggle, because these two identities now started to battle it out. I call them the ego identity and the soul identity in my first book, Journey to Me. And you feel that pull, and that constant battle ensues between these two identities. I got a second chance at life, so I felt compelled to step into that change. And I did, even though I didn't know what was in front of me, which was truly courageous to do. But I'm also motivated now by love of God, love for the second chance, and love for Donnie, who stood by me during those 12 days in the hospital. And so that I step in there, I don't know what I'm doing. And I take a job with medical devices, and I work at it for a year. And then I fully retire from medical sales when I find out I am carrying my miracle baby, Vivian. And I think it's going to be like a little break. No, turned into like a 3-year break. And it's during these 3 years that God is chiseling away those unwanted belief systems, and specifically my need for significance through the job I did. that was the big piece that he was chiseling away, because he's like, you don't need significance. Your significance and your happiness comes from within. That was the biggest lesson that he kind of was teaching me through that. It's like, and it's not going to happen on your timing, Sylvia. It's going to happen on mine. So it's, for the doer in me, that was a tough one, because I'm big about achieving. I've been achieving all this time. And then to go from achieving to like no achievements in my mind, that was tricky. That was really, really tricky as a woman, and as a Hispanic woman on top of that. I don't know if you could relate or
Oh,
not.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's tell people the title of your book again. It's
Sure. And
called,
Journey to Me, Trust the Wisdom of Change. It's a book that takes my coaching background and my faith and meshes it in with the guidance. So basically, I shared vulnerable stories of change in my own life, which is what God put in my heart to do. It's a little tricky to do. But then as I'm sharing that story, he had asked me to coach people to get to joy faster instead of taking the detours I took, which were
yeah.
plenty, girl. I let a lot of my patterns of behavior kind of steer those choices. I didn't realize how they controlled it until I became a coach. And then I realized, holy, there's like belief systems, like my not enoughness, not feeling worthy, that are kind of driving these big feelings in me. And when we have a big feeling, we react and we form habits around those reactions, and certain patterns are attached to that feeling. And I had a lot of patterns of control. I needed to control my circumstances a lot. As I wrote the book, I saw how those patterns were interrupted and how God came in so beautifully to teach me certain lessons. So chapter 1 is the lesson in responsibility, and how responsibility then takes on a beautiful thread in my life, how it helped me. And then the second is on my intuition, like how God was developing my intuition even as a teenager, being bullied. So all these are stories that kind of guide people to their more empowered selves, to their soul identity. And so I take you on this journey, and I share how turning points truly are life altering. It can help you find your soul identity, which is the person God created you to be, that beautiful light.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Sylvia, what's next for you? You're doing so much. You have the coaching program. You're helping people find their joy, becoming the people that God has created them to be. So what's the next big thing for you?
The next big thing for me is actually launching my masterminds based on Journey to Me, because it is something that God has placed in my heart to do. And I have been I've been developing the identity of an author by contributing to other collaborative works aside from Journey to Me is my book. But then I went on, and the latest project I have now is writing a chapter for a book that's going to be released in April. It's titled Show Your Work, and it's, I believe, 16 women that were invited to collaborate a chapter. And I have been forming the identity of an author because that's what he asked me to do. But now he's like saying, you know what? You've now established yourself as an author. Now what I need you to do is to start sharing that message with smaller groups of women, with corporate women, and share with them how they can use turning points to then move towards their soul identity and learn to turn to me, like towards me, because the book talks a lot about how to distinguish between thoughts and promptings of your heart, and when it's God speaking to you, and when it's your own programming speaking to you, and to learn how to distinguish between the two. And so he really needs me to promote that message more and more, because after the pandemic, people kind of lost faith in him. They have confused him with the hypocrisy they have felt in religion, for example. And I talk a lot about relationship with him. How are you in relationship with him? You can belong to a religion, but are you just believing in him? Or are you trusting him to take the reins of your life? There's a big difference between belief and trust. And I share the value of surrendering, these feelings to him and allowing him to work through you.
Yeah, I love it. And I love the term that you were using, soul identity. If someone was to ask you, what does that mean? What would you tell them?
we all have identities that we operate from. And your soul identity is the person, it's the person he envisioned for you. When he created you with specific gifts, very particular gifts, very unique gifts to you. And as change hits you, your soul identity is driving you to that person that he created you to be. But what happens is that we have been conditioned, we have programmed our mind to think a certain way based on the feelings we feed. It's kind of like the Native American parable. They talk about the evil and the good wolf and which one wins. Well, it's the one that you're constantly feeding. So if you're constantly feeding that programming of like, I can't do this, I'm not this person, I'm not worthy, I'm not gifted, then that's who you ultimately become. Yeah. So your soul identity is that person, that higher piece of you, that higher awareness of you, that's not part of this world. It's been part of the world of God, like the one that God inhabits and says, this is how I see you. Yeah. I see you whole. I see you gifted. I see you worthy. I need you to be this person because this is who I've envisioned. This is the person that's going to find the joy and the happiness in their everyday life, not achieve it. That happiness is not something you achieve. It's something that's already there. Yeah. It's just we don't see it because our big, hairy, horrible fear is blocking it from our view. And until you get to the root of what you believe about yourself, you'll act from your ego identity. Yeah. Which is your self-image, whatever you've created over time.
Yeah. How can people connect with you?
Right now, my webpage is under construction, so I can't send them there yet. But the best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn because you will see what people who have worked with me have said about my work, about how I've impacted their life. You all will see how I post and what I post about and the types of topics I discuss openly as a coach and how I guide others. So LinkedIn is a very good way to connect with me, and anybody can do it because I have it open to everybody. Facebook groups. There's a Facebook group on Journey to Me. You can find me that way. And I don't know if you can see it. You might not be able to see the book itself, but that's the title of the book. And that's basically what you'll see in the Facebook group. You can always find me there. I'm on Instagram as well. But LinkedIn is primarily the place to find me.
Great, great, great. As we wrap up your interview, Sylvia, what is the one thing that you want to leave with the audience? The one thing that they can start implementing into their life today?
Really, the one thing that's been coming up for me as we've interviewed is gratitude. And gratitude is a big piece because that has been very important in my own shift from a negative mindset, a high achiever, perfectionist mindset to the person I am today, is when I've become grateful about everything, including the lessons I've learned, the hard lessons in life and how they've impacted my life later. It has really shifted me to be that person. The more grateful I am to God for all the lessons I've learned, that he's taught me, that he's patiently taught me, because I've been stubborn, girl. He's been patiently teaching me about patience and this timing. The more grateful I am, the more I find myself loving my life more and more and seeing the beauty of my life as opposed to the focus of focusing on other things. And that's what's really shifted my life for the better. And that's something that anybody can implement right away. And you don't have to write it out. Some people don't like to write. So just in the morning as you wake up, silently tell yourself the 3 things that you're most grateful for. And then expand, as you see fit with your own self, right? I write things out because that's just me. I'm a writer. I'll say, I got to do this. I don't have to do it. I should not do it. I got to do it. I even got to do laundry and they're like, you're actually grateful for laundry? And I'm like, yes, I'm grateful that I have a machine washes it. I don't have to wash it by hand, and I get to be the loving and caring wife and mother to my kids. And And that's an expression when they have clean clothes to wear, you know. And I'm grateful that I have a husband who works so hard, and I'm so grateful for his job because it allows me the space to be a hands-on mom to my kids. I didn't do that when I was a single mom. I couldn't. I was busy paying the mortgage and paying schools. And so I'm grateful for even the things that I once was very bothered by. The time I started to incorporate gratitude, it just shifted my perspective and my feeling around these circumstances.
Yeah, I love it. Sylvia, you have given us so many golden nuggets to think about. CWS audience, I mean, you've heard her story. You've heard how God is using her in a mighty way. My challenge to you is this: there are miracles happening in your life right now, and you may not recognize them, but I want you to just take a moment and pause. Thank God for what He's already done, even for the hard things that you have gone through, because those hard things have developed you, made you a better person, has pushed you into the places where you need to be. God wants to use you in a mighty way. You are meant for great things. And it's time to start living your life the way that He has imagined you to be. So let's get to it, people. I'm waiting to see all that God is going to do through your life. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. And until next time, beautiful people, God bless.